Grant, what's going on, man? Thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
My pleasure, man. Thank you for having me on.
So tell me, is it getting dark over there in the UK? I think it's like what, just a little bit past 4 in the afternoon over there?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's kind of almost fully dark now. The sun's definitely set, but in winter it gets dark very early here. So yeah, it's pretty dark right now.
I always like to crack this joke with my British friends because I've told you when we were connecting that I actually used to live in the UK and just have the sun set so quickly. I always like to say that that's the reason why Dracula decided to move to the UK in the novel because he liked all that darkness and the cloud cover.
Yeah. There's definitely long winter nights here and stuff, but I quite like it for sleeping anyway because when I go to sleep it's dark, and then when I wake up it's dark, so I don't have to worry about the light or anything like that, which is good for my training and stuff like that as well.
Well, it's entirely different in the summertime though, because I kind of moved away from the UK towards the beginning of summer, but even then, I would still find myself wearing sunglasses outside up to about maybe 9, 10 o'clock at night. So you got like the exact opposite during the summer months.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And also, I wanted to check in with you to see how far along are you in Resident Evil 6? Because that's how we got connected because we had that same interest. So how far along are you?
Yeah, so it's a game I've played like many times before and stuff, but I used to play on the Xbox with my friend on the multiplayer, but I just bought it for PS4. So I think I'm like halfway through Leon's campaign or something like that. So it's like the first part of it, but it was one of those games that I always remembered being super enjoyable and stuff. It's one that a lot of the fans don't really like, but I liked it. So I thought I would get it and kind of relive some of those memories.
Well, yeah, I thought the gameplay was a lot more fast paced. And I think that was kind of the biggest gripe that I heard about the game was that it was an action game. It wasn't like a survival horror game like the early Resident Evil franchises. But yeah, you get to play as Leon, you get to play as Chris, and then you get to play as oh gosh, what's the other guy's name? The one that's with Sherry. Jake. Yeah. And it's just it's a fun game. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Now, do you have a favorite Resident Evil character?
I wouldn't say so because I'm not so into the kind of lore of it really. I only played some of the later games. I think I played one of the early ones, but I only sort of got into it later. But probably just Leon because I don't know too many of the other characters. But
I would agree with you on that one. So right on, man. All right. Well, I kind of want to get into this a little bit. I came across your YouTube channel a while back and, was just really, and well, first of all, man, I really do like your YouTube channel. It's just your messaging, the production quality of your videos are spot on, brother. So, so yeah, you're a fellow martial artist. And so I kind of want to just start there. And can you take us back a little bit here and just kind of tell us what sort of set you down that path?
Yeah, man. So I think it probably started for me when I was like just watching cartoons and stuff, like Saturday morning cartoons when I was a kid. And they would always have some combat and stuff in them, like even if it was just very kind of like vanilla stuff, there wasn't really super violence and things. And I was always just drawn to that. Like it was Batman or Spider-Man or these, heroes that young kids like and stuff. And then that kind of like persisted just through everything that I got into. And then I started, playing some beat 'em up games like Tekken and things like that. And then I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I think it just started with me just sort of starting to throw myself around. And, when you're a kid and you think you're those characters and stuff. And I was always super inspired and excited by that stuff. And then my dad showed me Enter the Dragon when I was probably way too young to be watching it. And then after I saw that, I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like it was one of those usual kind of entry points into the martial arts for a lot of people. But yeah, I think from there, that was always the thing that I did. But for many years, because I wouldn't say nowadays I was too young, but I didn't really go and formally study for a while. And I just kind of was very into martial arts movies and video games and things like that.
So eventually, did you get to a point where you kind of studied a little bit more formally, where you actually were taking like classes at a dojo or somewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember first I kind of knew what I wanted to be able to do because I played, like I said, I played the video games and stuff, and the certain characters I wanted to have movements like them and Bruce Lee and stuff. But I didn't know what that was. And it was like, I remember in Tekken, Paul was one of my favorite characters for a time, and he did judo, but his version of judo in the game is nothing like real judo, and he does loads of punches and flips and stuff as well. And I was like, so I went to judo, and then I was like, this isn't like what Paul does in the game. So I like did judo for a little bit, and I was like really I was really small as a kid, and I just got like thrown around by this other boy that was probably not much older than me, but he was huge, and I just didn't like it. I was like, this isn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to do like striking and, really dynamic movements and things. So I went to there, and then I kind of was looking around other styles after that. But where I'm from, it's quite like a small, I would call it like a dead end town, really. There's not kind of very much going on here. So there isn't any big dojos like a city and stuff, like they have in big cities and stuff. So most of the martial arts schools were just kind of these places where it was like somebody would hire out a sports hall and they would teach their classes in there. So it was quite limited in terms of what I could actually do. And so after that, I think it was because of a friend at school, I started training in Wing Chun. He'd started doing Wing Chun, which was a little bit closer to what I wanted to do. And I did like some of the stuff in there. So I stuck with that a little bit longer. But we didn't, it was quite a limited class. We did like, all we ever did was the forms, the kind of like standing like this and the really slow movements. And we just did this for the whole lessons. And I think I probably trained there for about 6 months, and we hit pads maybe once. And I was like, and when we did hit the pads, I was like, this is amazing. I really like doing this. And I was probably like 10 years old at the time or something. And so I got a little bit bored with that because it wasn't really going anywhere. And I was like, we didn't do any kicks. Obviously, Wing Chun doesn't have any kicks above the waist or anything. And I wanted to do like the dynamic kicking techniques. And then eventually I got into, I can't remember, I did like a bit of kickboxing, and then eventually got to Tae Kwon Do, which was a much more kind of dynamic and the type of kicking and dynamic movement that I wanted to do. And then I sort of stuck with that the longest, I would say. But all of this time that I was doing this, I was sort of just training in my own way as well, just very naturally drawn to kind of passionately go out and train, even though I probably didn't really know what I was doing. But looking back at that stuff now, I think that really helped me to develop a very keen sense of body awareness. And it really helped within the martial arts when I actually started studying formally as well.
So was Tae Kwon Do like the first time you actually were sparring with like the striking sense? Because it sounds like you weren't doing any sparring when you were doing Wing Chun at all.
Yeah, they didn't spar in Wing Chun. It was only in the adults class they sparred, and it was such a difference because in the kids Wing Chun class it was like very controlled, but the adults like knocked hell out of each other. They just like smashed each other up and stuff. And I remember once watching the adults spar, and it's obviously like in a Wing Chun style, but they like smashed into chairs and knocked each other over and stuff like that. But we never did any of that stuff. So by the time I got to Tae Kwon Do, though, it was at more of an age where like sparring was introduced. And obviously like they have kids in MMA sparring now from the time they start training, which is really good. But when I did Tae Kwon Do, you had to be a little bit older to spar properly and stuff, but it was so much more dynamic. And again, that was another thing with the Tekken, because Hwarang was a Tae Kwon Do guy and I really liked his kicks. So I was like, yeah, it's cool. And I just took to that much better. And I did like all the patterns and stuff as well, like, because that teaches the control and relaxation and stuff that's really necessary in striking. So that was really good for me as well.
So going into your first sparring match, if you can remember back that far, what was kind of going through your mind at the time? Were you nervous about actually having someone in front of you that was trying to kick your head off, figuratively speaking? Or were you just kind of able to sort of get right on into it without really any worries?
Yeah, I think it was just because I used to train with quite a few friends there as well. Like some other people from my school went to it. So it was a good environment. We all would train together and stuff. And I don't really remember ever thinking of it in those terms. It was always just quite fun. And it was controlled. It wasn't like, because I was probably like 11 or 12 or something. It wasn't like the instructor would just let you smash each other up and stuff. But
right.
But it was good. Yeah, I always just liked to just do the techniques really and kind of like try them out and move around together and stuff. And there wasn't anybody with a super strong ego that would try and kind of take you out and stuff. So it was always pretty all right from what I remember.
Did you ever find your way into any competitions along the way? I would imagine that with Tae Kwon Do, and, correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say that there's probably not really much in the way of like form competition with that style. I'd say like any competition is usually with like point sparring, and anything along those lines.
Yeah, you could do in the tournaments, you could do either patterns, which is like the forms, or you could do sparring. And I did do some of those kind of like when I'd been probably training for like a year or something. I did some of those. But it was like the point stop style. You couldn't do, again, it was one of those things with age. Like you couldn't, when you were really young, you couldn't do continuous. You could only do point stops at that time. So I did a few of those. Yeah, I did a few of those.
Gotcha. Yeah, I did Tang Sudo karate and ended up earning my black belt from it. But yeah, I do remember like forms were very big in that style, and of course point sparring as well too. But I was just wondering, with Taekwondo being predominantly, a kicking style, I want to say that the ratio is maybe like 90% kicks, 1%, or excuse me, 10% hand strikes, possibly. So yeah, I wasn't really quite sure exactly how much forms would be involved with that style.
Yeah, it was. It was more like the forms were more kind of like the traditional blocks and stuff. So it was like there was one that had this block and then into this and then the punches and stuff like that. So it was more of that kind of stuff. But then the sparring is kind of entirely different. So the patterns in Taekwondo are a little bit more kind of like karate patterns or something like that. Very like traditional punching from the waist and stuff. But then the sparring, you've seen the Taekwondo guys spar, they don't even have a guard, a lot of them. They just kind of stand like this and just bounce around and stuff. So it's definitely kicking predominant. Yeah. But that was another reason why eventually I got a little bit tired of Taekwondo because I wanted to have more hands as well. So it's amazing for the kicks, but does definitely lack on the hands, as you pointed out there as well.
So as you decided to expand and build on your arsenal a little bit, what did you move on from there after you like kind of sort of tapered off doing Taekwondo?
Yeah, so it was probably it. I didn't go into that stuff straight away in terms of like wanting to learn hand stuff. I actually after I did, so this was sort of at the same time as Taekwondo. I got into tricking, which are you familiar with tricking, which is like the acrobatic kind of martial arts move, sometimes called extreme martial arts, but it's kind of formed into its own style now. So that was quite a good natural progression from Taekwondo because Taekwondo already had the foundation for that, like the very dynamic kicks and all of that sort of stuff. And then you build upon that. So, in Taekwondo, you've got like the 360 round kick or the tornado kick. And then in tricking, you'll do the 540 where you land on the kicking leg and then you can do the cheat 900, which is like a double spin and stuff like that. So that stuff was very similar to, like the video games and things, the really like flamboyant over the top stuff. So I really got into that for a time. And I think I did that sort of, like I said, while I was still studying Taekwondo, but I just carried on mostly tricking at that time, but because it contained all the kicks, it kept all that stuff sharp, and it kept that body awareness there and really expanded on that as well, because you need a really advanced sense of motor coordination to be able to execute those moves and stuff. So I think it really helped with that.
Yeah, I remember seeing some of those extreme martial arts videos. Like this was really big back in the early 2000s, especially.
Yeah.
I remember, and even doing like the acrobatics and the tricking with weapons too. Like I'll see like
Yeah. Yeah.
suddenly a sword will fly up in the air. Someone does like a big spin, and then they catch it on the way down. I'm like, oh my goodness. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I definitely find that there's a lot of kinesthetic, value to learning stuff like that, though, too. I mean, I almost wonder if me now in my mid 30s, if I think I should go kind of back to that. I don't know. We'll see. All right. So, like, at what point did you incorporate boxing into your practice? Because I know that boxing, is kind of like a big part of what you do now. When did that kind of sort of fall
Yeah.
into the timeline?
Yeah. So I got, I think with tricking, like when I started, if you know about this, you might have heard about this, but it started very martial arts centric, like you say, with the NASCAR circuit and stuff in America. And it was all about the tricks that you did in the forms there. They had to have some kind of kick in them, and they couldn't be just a flip, because then you wouldn't score, because it had to be martial arts. But I guess as the sport or discipline, you could call it, progressed, people started just coming into it who hadn't got a martial arts background because it was very visually appealing. So I like stayed doing kind of the stuff I was doing, like the martial arts centric stuff, and a few of my friends like that stuff. But I think I just kind of, in a way, got a little bit jaded with tricking, because what was being celebrated was just all of the like big twists and all of the stuff like that. And to me, that wasn't martial arts focused. So although it's impressive to see and stuff like that, I was a bit like, I don't know, I got a little bit tired of the movement, because you used to go to these gatherings and stuff where people would all meet who were trickers, and like you would just sleep on a floor and get no sleep and then go tricking the next day and eat a terrible diet and stuff. It's just like not the way to do it, but it was good fun. And then, yeah, so you would do all that stuff, but all the stuff at the gatherings was all like the big tricks. And I was a bit like, this isn't, I don't know, it didn't really appeal to me anymore. So
Yeah, you're not at a gymnastics competition. You're at a martial arts
yeah,
competition. Hmm.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And nowadays the trickers are doing like insane stuff, kind of like what it was back when I did it was like some of the stuff now people are doing as basic tricks was like the high level stuff then, so it's kind of really evolved and all that. But I think like I said, I continued tricking and stuff and like doing the moves I was doing, but I probably naturally lost a bit of interest with it. So that's when I started just looking at other things, I think. And I kind of felt like I went back to the roots again of like what I was into, you know. So with like the movies and stuff. And then it was sort of around, I think it was around the time like McGregor was starting to become quite popular. And then like the UFC was getting more on the map of everyone. And I started tuning more into that because it was more kind of like underground before. And then like I started watching more of that stuff and really, yeah, it felt like when I used to watch Bruce Lee again, you know, like the old stuff with just like the basic strikes and the kind of like ferocity and stuff. And I think from there that, you know, gave me a desire to start to learn boxing properly because I already had the kicks and I'd maintained them. And I think through tricking as well, like I said, that, you know, that very kinesthetic awareness of the body, like it translated well to that. And I kept the kicks and then improved on, like I say, improved on my kicking techniques through the tricking. And then it just was a natural progression really to go to add the boxing to it. Like we did some stuff in Tae Kwon Do, but it's definitely not focused on hands. So it was a good progression to go to that.
What about in the realms of like jujitsu or other grappling arts? Is that something that you incorporate very much into your practice, or would you say you're kind of more of a striker through and through?
Yeah, definitely a striker. Yeah, I've done a little bit of grappling and stuff because I used to train with one of my friends, Vaughan, was a UFC veteran where I used to live, and we did some stuff together. But it was mainly like takedowns, you know, from striking and things. But yeah, I think like the grappling stuff has not really ever appealed to me in that regard to sort of train it. So maybe it will later on or something. But it was always the striking and the dynamic sort of movements, which I think makes sense from my influences was all of that sort of stuff anyway. It would always be, you know, like Batman punching somebody or Bruce Lee kicking someone or something like that. So
Okay, so going back a little bit, you kind of talked about some of your initial inspirations. You know, watching like Batman, Spider Man. For me, I think like for many martial artists at the time. Was like Dragon Ball Z. You know, Goku. I think is still my spirit animal, even to this day. But obviously those are like some inspirations we had. But we do have some really good mentors along the way who are teaching us everything and guiding us along the way, or instilling discipline, making sure we're staying focused on everything. So, who have been some of your like mentors that you've had along the way, and how have they influenced you throughout your martial arts journey?
yeah, I would say there's only like one person I can sort of think of, but it wasn't really like a huge influence. And it was a guy, it was actually someone at the Taekwondo class. It was this guy who was probably like when I was a kid and I was starting out, he was like in his mid-20s and he was really impressed by what I could do because I was like very natural at the movements anyway. So I progressed quite quickly, you know, like in terms of what belt I was, my ability was much higher. And that was due to like my outside training as well. I would always finish the classes and then train every day, you know, outside of that as well. Whereas most people just go to the formal classes and that's it. But he was just very encouraging, you know, like when we were training and stuff, and he would always give me really good words of encouragement. Like we would, even though he was like way bigger than me, we'd spar together and stuff and things like that. Obviously, he was taking it easy because he could have just knocked me out if he'd wanted. But he would like encourage me like where to hit and where the openings were and stuff. And then he would be, yeah, just very encouraging after. And I think that helped me to, it kind of like got me into this feedback loop, you know, of like thinking, oh yeah, I'm quite good, you know, and then I'm getting this like positive appraisal for it, and then it kind of made me feel better and then builds that confidence. So yeah, there was him, but really other than that, I think it was more like more just mentors by proximity in a sense, you know, like people that I would watch and stuff and didn't really have actual interaction with. And I think like I don't know if like many people are able to do that and have the motivation to, you know, continue training on their own like that without having people around them. But I was always just very passionately just drawn to go out and train. And I think like all it would take would for me to be like watch some stuff and then I'd be like all, you know, energized and stuff. And then I'd want to go out. So I'd say those people in a sense were like my mentors, but even I didn't have actual interaction with them, was more like the influential people and stuff.
Gotcha. And that kind of segues in nicely with what I wanted to talk to you about next. And, I mean, when it comes to either doing martial arts training, regular physical training, or really just working on anything that one can do to better themselves, we all know that consistency is absolutely critical. But, let's be honest, we're human beings. And there's just going to be some days where we're just not going to feel like going out and doing certain things, regardless of how passionate we might actually be about it. So, when you have those days where maybe you just don't feel like, going to go train, or, even with yourself as a YouTuber, maybe you don't feel like editing the freaking video today or anything like that. What is kind of sort of in the back of your mind that gets you out there to go do it, even on those days where you don't even really feel like it?
Yeah, I think sometimes I actually don't do it. I think that's quite important as well, is like to sort of honor how you feel sometimes, because I think there's a danger in just like pushing on sometimes without paying attention to that stuff, and you can kind of drive yourself into the ground. Like I've been a bit burnt out sometimes with the YouTube channel of trying to like pump out too much stuff and not take any breaks or anything. And one thing I have found with training actually is that I think I used to be very anxious about like if I didn't do it every single day or whatever, that I would lose it. But I think this is probably due to experience as well. Is like when you do have a lot of experience, it takes a lot more than you probably think to start to decline. So you can afford a little bit of time off, and then you probably will come back better anyway. You'll be a bit more recovered and feel more um, passionate about it again, because it's not so much just, it's like when you are like tired and stuff like that, it affects your mentality as well. So it can make you, it's not just your body and then you can go and do it. It's like you feel it will like lower your mood and things. So I find sometimes when you are kind of getting burnt out with it, to actually take that rest can help you to come back and stuff. But I would say with training, it's always, just because I've done it for so long, it's quite automatic. Like I can feel that resistance come up, but then I've got enough experience of just kind of going and doing it that I know that that subsides quite quickly. Whereas I think when we start to like listen to our thoughts and let them, we like they feed on and grow and stuff, and then that resistance becomes really kind of insurmountable. So I think to just like act quickly, when you don't want to do it, and you can say things to yourself like, I'm just going to do a shorter workout today or something, and then you'll probably find that when you begin, it becomes easier and you want to carry on. And I think like that that's one thing with the training for me, like I said, because it's been something that I've done for so long, it's quite easy for me to do. But with the YouTube stuff, because that's something obviously I started like later in my life, like when you're a kid, things are easier because they're very programmed and stuff, so you just kind of like enact the pattern without thinking about it. But with the YouTube stuff, it has been harder because I'm not like it's not really like something that's that natural for me. Like when I still find shooting the videos quite stressful and writing them and things like that. So I just have to, I guess, remind myself what I'm actually working towards with it in a sense. And it's like, it doesn't have to be too perfect, because I think sometimes that can be something for me, definitely personally, because I'm quite a perfectionist, that gets in the way of that stuff. Like sometimes the resistance to doing it is because you want it to be so perfect, and then like it creates all this mental chatter where you get kind of frozen. So just to relax and make it as easy as possible, I think is the way to go for me with that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of at a point in your life, especially like we'll just kind of focus in on your training here for just a second. That you've been so consistent with it; it's just kind of become like a natural part of your day. That it would almost feel weird to go and to like not train, like
Absolutely,
on,
yeah.
on some of those days. Like I don't know if you've heard of Andy Frisella, First Form, and
Get 75 bad, yeah.
yeah. So with 75 hard is one of those things. They those who do 75 hard have a checklist of tasks that they're expected to complete every single day. And a lot of them would say that, by the end of the 75 days, when they're not tracking things anymore, it would actually feel weird to not do their 2 workouts a day, to not read their
Yeah.
10 pages, or to not drink a gallon of water. And there's a few other things in there as well that I'm a little bit fuzzy on. But I think that's just eventually you get to that point, though, where it's like that's just a natural feeling doing the exercise. And it feels weird if you don't do it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. That's I did forget that there, but that's the thing again, I guess, because that's so natural. It's like, and I think that's what allows me to take the time off if I need it as well, because I don't worry that I'm not going to be able to get back on the horse. Like, with other things, like when the habit's not so solidified, you worry that if you do let it slip, it's going to be so much harder to do it again. But I always know, or to kind of get back on the horse, but I always know with training, for instance, like maybe one day will go by, say if a second day goes by, and by the third day I'm getting quite itchy to sort of get back to it. So it's very difficult for people who haven't trained to get the energy and that like activation energy to go and do it. But I think that past a certain level of experience kind of reverses in a sense, and it's like hard not to do it. Like you start to feel strange within yourself when you're not doing the thing, kind of that thing. And it's like I sometimes look at people who don't train, and people like a lot of people don't do any exercise at all, or just walk or something, and I can't understand how they can sort of like exist within their body like that, because I would just feel, I don't know, like after a certain amount of time, I feel strange. And, when you do train, how good it makes you feel and stuff, and kind of like how relaxed you are afterwards, that I can't imagine not doing it. So yeah, I really agree with that point.
Well, and I also think that there's a good amount of grace that comes along with this too. And by grace, I mean that no one should really have the expectation that when they go into a training session that they're going to be able to like output 100% all the time. Like this happened to me like many times over. It actually happened to me earlier this week, if I'm being honest, where it's like I still went to go do my training session, but the amount of weight that I was able to put up was not as good as I usually would get, like with the particular exercises and so on and so forth. I was just kind of out of it. But I think just where I felt like I still won for the day, though, was that I actually went and did it anyway, rather than just saying, well, if I'm not going to do it as good, I might as well not go and do it at all. But still, at the end of the day, something is always going to be better than doing nothing.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think that mentality is really important, because even for me, like I'll go through sort of like weird peaks and valleys with that, where I'll sort of have expectations, and then I'll start to go into the sessions with those expectations very subconscious, and I don't realize I'm doing it again. I'm like, oh, you're starting to put too much expectations on it now, which always tends to, finish in disappointment. Because if you're training that often, like almost every single day, there's no way that you're going to have the same session every single day. And so I think it's, for me though, it can even happen where, if I'm not careful with my mentality and aware of it, I can even go and just, even what you said of that, I went at least, anyway, that sometimes isn't enough for me. And I have to remind myself, like, no, this, like, you don't need to be like a superstar every time you go, basically. It's like, because I think sometimes for me, like, in terms of how that expresses within training itself, it'll be, when I go, and if I don't feel, what annoys me when I go training and what like gets to me, and if I'm not careful, it can send me into a bit of a spiral, is if I don't feel like I've got the pop and kind of the explosiveness that I usually have, or I don't feel as like energized and stuff. And then if I do that, I sort of like now try to catch myself, and I'll just do a very like a lighter but like more fluid session, and like try some things out, more creative and things in the session, rather than thinking I have to do like 12 rounds of hard boxing or something with each hit like is perfect and stuff like that. Because like you were saying before, that consistency is so much more important than like a massive intense session that you have to rest for days afterwards. It's better to just go to that 70%, I would say. And, consistency over time is so much more important.
Absolutely. And you also brought up the point where you said you didn't really quite fully understand how some people can exist in their bodies when they're not like expressing themselves in the form of movement, at least in some way. Like, I mean, we're talking about martial arts here, but even as something like going for a walk or something along those lines too, which it's weird when I see this in society, like in these days. With my line of work, I travel a lot, so I'm in and out of airports like all the time. I was at this one airport that was like really, really small. Like the entire terminal was maybe like 100 meters long, something like that. And if I'm ever in those situations where I have like a flight that I'm waiting for, like seldomly do I actually just like sit down anywhere and wait for it. I use the time to actually like walk or just move, do something. I call it airport rucking, because I got my backpack on and everything. I'll just listen to a podcast. But as I'm doing this, like people actually look at me with strange looks, because like I'll make it to the end of the terminal, I'll like touch the wall or the window, and I'll walk to the other direction. Same thing, I'll get there, I'll touch the wall to say that I've made it there, and then I'll keep doing that for however long I need to till my flight's ready to board. But seems like for the majority of people, that's weird. Like to actually walk and move my body in that way is weird, rather than just like sitting down to like and just waiting. So yeah, it's just kind of like strange in this modern day how just movement in general is I wouldn't necessarily say frowned upon, but it's not something that is like so commonplace that people would just look at it as like a normal thing. And I even see this like in other parts of the airport too, where everyone's lining up at the escalator or the elevator and the stairs are completely empty.
Yeah.
And I might be the only one who's going down the stairs. So why is movement weird, man?
Yeah, that reminds me of something actually that I heard that Jackie Chan, every time he used to stay in a hotel, would, instead of using the elevator, he would run up all of the stairs right to the top floor and like to get his exercise in and stuff. So, but yeah, I think the same thing as that. And even like the like you say, movement is like weird in the modern day. Like the fact that we've even had to invent like gyms where people go and work out, you know, like if you said about that concept to ancient people who were like farming and stuff, they'd be like, why do you need to do this? You know, like because their lifestyles were so active and demanding anyway, it would be a ludicrous thing for them to they didn't need to do it basically. So but yeah, like with the modern day, like people's jobs and stuff, obviously we have gyms where people go and just work out when, yeah, in the past it wouldn't be something that was weird. And even when it comes to, you know, things like food and nutrition and stuff, like people, like if you were eating something that you know you're supposed to consume, people are like, oh, that's really healthy. And you're like, well, this is kind of like what you're supposed to be eating. It's like things have become sort of flipped upside down. And there's so many things within like modern life that are like that now, you know, like the way things are supposed to be is now considered to be abnormal in a weird sense.
Yeah, like just wanting to like eat like an apple instead of a candy bar, or me wanting to cook like a grass-fed steak versus like going to the McDonald's drive-through or something like that.
Yeah.
Those are also not like common practices very much in this day and age either. And so speaking of which, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about next is just, you kind of your diet and nutrition protocols as well. What have you kind of found sort of fits your lifestyle and also your style of training the best?
Yeah, so I've done loads of different things. Like nutrition's always been one of those things that I've liked to, I don't know, been quite interested in and like watch podcasts of, read things about and stuff. And I always like to try out different things, I guess, with my own body. And I think I started out doing, well, there was a time when I didn't really know any of this stuff and I kind of would just eat anything. And then I started to get more serious about training. And then obviously that comes with the nutrition as well. So I started to look into it. And like many people, I started with what I call like the bro bodybuilding diet, which is just like the chicken, broccoli and rice and stuff.
Right.
I did that for like a while and things, and then just tried different things out. But nowadays I do very similar to what Paul Saladino promotes, which is what he calls the animal-based diet, but which is like animal products like meat and eggs and butter, grass-fed butter. And he adds fruit into the diet. So it's similar to like a carnivore diet, but with the fruit and honey. And I did do carnivore for a while. This was something I tried out last year. But I found with my training and stuff, like after a certain period, I was like not energetic at all because of the lack of carbohydrates in the diet. But one thing I did find that was really good from that was eating more ruminant meats, more red meats, because before with the chicken and stuff, there's not much fat in it and it's much less nutritionally dense. So that was a really good thing I did take from carnivore, was like starting to bring more red meat in, because like I said before, it was just chicken. And I tried just having fruits and honey, like Saladino promotes, but still I found that with my like intensity of workouts and sort of like my energetic load, and I mean, you can see I'm not like massive at all. I'm like quite thin. So I've not got much fat or anything like to go on. So I needed like a bit extra, especially because my workouts are demanding. So I sometimes add in some oats and white rice in there as well, like around the workouts. But I found that's pretty much the best thing. And one thing I really like about that way of eating as well is that I don't feel hungry in between meals. Whereas with the chicken and broccoli or like that kind of thing before, I would always feel quite hungry again not long after the meal. Whereas like with this, I only have about two meals a day. And then if I'm on a quite demanding day, I might have a snack in between, but I don't feel hungry at all. And that's a really nice feeling, like not having to look for more stuff all the time and have that on your mind. So.
Yeah, well, I like that you brought up Dr. Salandino. I listened to a lot of his stuff and I've kind of implemented a lot of things that he talked about as well. And there was a video that he posted in the past. You just made me think of it when you talked about you kind of sort of veered away from the chicken and got into like the red meats. He would say that, why would you eat such a weak bird? Is effectively like what he talked about, rather than like a much larger and stronger and powerful animal like a cow, or even like game meats out there like venison or bison and things along too, which that's kind of been how I've sort of structured my diet quite a bit. It's a little bit more costly, going for like wild game animals like bison and venison and things like that. I'm also a hunter here in Texas, and I have got a wild boar out in the wild too. So I've been eating wild boar meat,
Oh,
which
nice.
tastes so much better than anything domesticated, man. Let me tell you. So,
Yeah, completely different. Yeah.
but but yeah, it's just and kind of going back to what you sort of brought up about just like our ancient ancestors and like just how everyday life for them, just staying physically active, was just doing what they needed to do to survive. And when I think about it, like wild game animals and those big, strong, powerful animals, that's what sustained life on this planet longer than anything else. Like anything modern that we've implemented today has not persisted nearly as long as those practices.
Yeah, 100%, man. Yeah. And it's like there's so much of this stuff about like the cholesterol and all that sort of stuff within these things that this you'll know about that. Like and like Saladino talks about all of this stuff, but it just came to me then, I'm not sure if you're aware of that. I can't remember which organization it came out of that rated ground beef as less healthy than Cheerios or something like that. Like
Yeah,
there's a
I did see that. I can't remember the organization offhand, but I did see that though.
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I have done lately as well is I was having almost red meat for every serving now. But what I've started doing is I was reading some boxing nutrition stuff, and it's recommended for boxers like competitive boxers to eat more white meats because it's quicker to digest for the training and stuff. So that's been one thing I've been trying out is like having a meal with red meat and some more dense stuff like in the evening after I've trained, and then having my first meal of more like something a bit lighter. And I just wanted to see how that would affect me with training and stuff. But it's not really been long enough that I've tried that yet. So I'll let you know about that once I get some results or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean, it just really, there's something to be said about like all of these, food practices that have just been, like I said, sustaining life on this planet for millions of years, frankly. And like, but now in this modern day, a lot of them are kind of going out of style where, yeah, it's just, there is kind of this villainization of things like food and red meat, which now, to some degree, I can sort of see where a lot of people are going with. Like, I know a lot of people who, stop eating meat for ethical reasons, like mass farming and things like that. And, the big, huge slaughterhouse chains and everything. And, they're worried about like the welfare of the animals. It's like, I get that to an extent. But then I also hear like a lot of people, they'll say, like what I do, where it's like I'll try to source my meat locally, or if I
Yeah.
want something, I'll try to go out and hunt it myself, or something along those lines too. So
Yeah.
it's again, just like the fact that we have such a populated planet, and we're trying to feed everyone, that yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of these ancient practices have kind of sort of started to fizzle out because they can't they're not able to really sustain like a population that's this dense.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but there's a clear agenda against a lot of it as well. Like with the stuff of that started with like Ansel Keys, if you've heard of him before, that basically
Mm-mm.
he was like the man that villainized cholesterol and stuff like that, and kind of had all of this propaganda around. I'm not sure if he worked with like cereal companies and stuff, but he was like a low fat guy, that was promoting all the low fat stuff, which is still so prevalent today. And people like anyone that you see like will be like, oh, that's like a lot of red meat and stuff. Like it's considered part of the collective, consciousness that like, oh, red meat will make you have a heart attack and stuff. And it's just there's so much more to it than that, and it's just in many cases not true. And things like cholesterol are connected to so many other biomarkers as well that it's like, yes, if you're eating like hamburgers in buns with a load of like fried seed oil, French fries and stuff, then you're going to probably run into problems. But it's completely different eating like a grass-fed steak or something like you've said. So there's so much propaganda around it, and like it's not what it seems on the surface as well when you do look into that stuff.
Well, and of course, like a lot of these like ultra processed food companies out there too, they have a business to run. So they're trying to think of any
Yeah.
which way they can to, increase their sales as much as possible, where, they're employing like behavior psychologists who would
Yeah.
like meticulously analyze like the ingredients, the preservatives, the chemicals that are going into their food, just to try to get people to, not want to stop at a single bite, to kill an entire bag so they can go and buy another one. So Whether that's like an agenda to try to weaken the population, I don't think I would go that far. But at the end of the day, like I said, they're a business. Their bottom line is
Yeah.
to make money and to sell products. So they're going to try and find any which way to get people to do it. But unfortunately, it's just a lot of people are kind of falling for it, hook, line, and sinker,
Yeah.
and they are buying up all that stuff, and it is showing kind of across the board that we do have a decrease in our overall physical health. When you look at the population as a whole.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like when you do look into some of these, the studies that come out that kind of vilify a certain thing that you can usually trace back to it's been like funded by the companies that are making the solution or something like that. So there's definitely some dodgy stuff going on, and like there's many reasons for it, but like you said, we don't need to really get into those. But yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a very, very deep, dark rabbit hole. That's probably a
Yeah.
podcast in and of itself. But what I want to ask you about next, and this is kind of just piggybacking off of our earlier discussion on consistency. So whenever you have like moments where like you're traveling somewhere, I know you've gotten out and had to travel not too long ago. And I always find that travel is like a total routine breaker. Like we're away from our kitchens and our fridges that we have stocked with the food that we want, or we're away from our gyms or our dojos or whatever the case may be. But and then now we're in a foreign place to some degree. I mean, it may be a place that we've been to before, but we just don't have our routines following with us. So in those events, how do you stay consistent when those types of situations arise in your life?
Yeah, so what I will usually do is I will look for if the place is quite developed, I'll look for like a gym that might be quite good. But if it's still too difficult to do that, then I will just do body weight training at home, like or wherever I'm staying or something. Because this is something I do to sort of supplement my martial arts training anyway. Is like a lot of intense explosive body weight circuit stuff, and that's something that I can do literally within just a few meters. So it's really handy, and it's movements that I always say mirror the movements of martial arts in a sense. So it's like using your body and like springing off the floor into the air and stuff, stuff that's going to really kind of improve your martial arts based skills. So I can always do that, and that's usually what I do. But in terms of eating and stuff, if I'm not really like aware of what's going to be in the foods that I have, what I'll do is I'll tend to usually like fast or something like that, and then just like I'll make sure I'm still getting enough calories when I do eat, but I'll know that it's going to be more calorically dense than what I usually eat. So I'll just usually fast and then eat like a huge meal or 2 meals or something like that, and then that usually allows me to stay kind of consistent. But it depends on like what the trip is. So recently I went on vacation and I wanted to like enjoy myself a bit. So I did that fasting thing there. And then so I would like fast all day. Then about 6 p.m. I just went out and basically ate what I want, which was probably like thousands of calories, but I would work out before that as well. So I'd wait and do the workout right at the end and then go out. And then like I would see no real changes to my physique or anything like that or performance. So I find that's a good way to do it rather than just, eating loads of different meals throughout the day that you just don't know what they are. Like when you do a long fast like that, if you're still trying to kind of watch what you eat somewhat, it's very difficult to massively overeat calories in one meal. So I find that's quite a good way to do it. And that's where a lot of the one meal a day people kind of draw their thing from. So
Agreed. Yeah, and actually, there's lots of ways to plan for that too. Because I certainly do get it absolutely. Where if you're traveling and culinary experiences, very much make up certain places that you go to. But yeah, I think planning with like fasting or maybe just eating a little bit smaller leading up to dinner time, just so you can at least obviously have some calorie intake to kind of sustain you and your energy levels throughout the day. Like even yesterday was my birthday, and I knew I was going to be going out to dinner with some friends last night. Which, by the way, if you ever come to Texas, hit up Texas barbecue. It's better than like barbecue you can get anywhere else. Let me tell you that right now. And of course, some people from other places around the country or elsewhere that do barbecue may argue with me, but I'd say Texas barbecue is top notch. But anyway, so I knew I was going to go out and get barbecue with my friends last night. So just throughout the day, like I think the first time I ate something was I think at like 11 o'clock yesterday, somewhere around there, and it was something pretty small. Or I would just maybe have like a protein shake or something like that, like pre-workout and post-workout or something. But yeah, there's lots of ways that you can plan for those things too, and everything. And I also really liked what you mentioned about body weight training. Like I think body weight training, I don't know if it's entirely overlooked, but it doesn't seem to come to mind right away when someone talks about wanting to get into fitness. It's usually weights, it's usually running or something along those lines. But moving your body through space, it can get taxing pretty fast. And there's so many different variations that you can do with push-ups and handstand push-ups and, squats and lunges and everything. You also made this point in one of your videos, I can't remember which one offhand, where you said that someone who's confined to like a prison cell may actually probably get some better results than someone who has access to a gym, because it's like, if all they have is just like their body weight, they don't really have to think about a whole lot. They can just get right to the training, where someone who maybe has access to a gym may have paralysis by analysis, because there's so many different things that they could do at the gym. So they're not sure what to do. So body weight training just has like that simplistic approach that you can get a lot of good results with.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I think in that video, I was basically saying how people, there's so many options out there that they'll like flip flop between everything, and they'll do something for like a few weeks, and then it's nowhere near long enough to judge the results. And they'll be like, oh, it's not working now, and I'll go do something else. And the net result of doing that over a long enough time is just nothing. So they're like, oh, it doesn't work. Whereas like some guy in a prison cell has just got no options. So he just like does push-ups on the spot. And some of these prison guys are just jacked, you know what I mean? Like that's all they do and stuff. And they might be taking other stuff as well, we don't know in there, but there is something to limiting the options. And I think for me, I've always liked the body weight training just because it was very similar to martial arts, and like looking at different athletes that are similar to me. You don't see Floyd Mayweather like deadlifting huge weights and stuff like that. And there's a reason for that, because you need a certain type of body for that sport and a certain type of programming and things like that. But yeah, I've always really liked that. And I think that when you know how to work out properly like that, it doesn't have to be long either. Like I would get really bored with hours and hours long workout. Like when I'll do those sessions, it'll take maybe 45 minutes to an hour max, and then it's done, and like you're drenched, like you've been in the shower, because if you're just constantly moving and like you're working all different muscles of the body in it, and then combine that with a decent, sensible diet, and you can get in really good shape. And I think, like you say, people overcomplicate things. Like there's so many people who I've spoke to who kind of have said they desire a result to be like mine, and then I'll just tell them what I'm doing, and then they'll come back a few weeks later like, oh yeah, what am I going to do for my legs though? And I'm like, just what I've already told you, like you're starting to look outside now for other things. It's like what you want, I've told you how to get that result. But then I think sometimes it's that people think, the mind likes to overcomplicate things, and they think it can't be that simple, and they're like, no, it must be something else, and then it ties into like the initial excitement and motivation that dies off, and then they don't want to just continue the process. So there's many factors that come into it. But yeah, I've always liked that type of training, and I think I would always recommend that for somebody, just because it's so easy to do as well. Like even getting yourself to the gym is another barrier for many people to kind of get into shape. So why not just be able to do it like next to your bed or something in your bedroom? That's like literally all you need. So
yeah, or in a hotel room or anywhere else that you may be going to just as well. And actually, I would like to say that I'm a good case study for how like fit someone can get just using body weight training. I didn't mention this to you when you and I were connecting, but I was a Peace Corps volunteer at one time, and the U.S. Peace Corps, they send volunteers to developing countries around the world. They're living amongst the locals and everything. So I lived in the Gambia in West Africa for 2 years, and I was in like a rural village, just way, way, way out there in the country. So no electricity, no running water, just a very, very simple way of living. So, and I guess, it should go without saying, I didn't have access to a gym like the entire time I was living there. So all I had was body weight training at my disposal. And I tell you, Grant, I got in nasty shape, like just straight up nasty shape. Like the leanest I ever was in my entire life was during that time as well. And then also it's just, with the Gambia being a developing country, I just simply did not have any availability of junk food. Like there was no,
Yeah.
I couldn't just go to, the local gas station and get a bag of Doritos or, one of those hot dogs or anything along those lines. It was just whatever my host family was able to make up for me at that time. And that's pretty much like all I ate for the better part of 2 years. And but yeah, I just got in nasty shape. I mean, like you said, I mean, there's limitations to like, how much muscle mass you put on. I certainly didn't get as big and
Yeah.
strong as like Eddie Hall or anything like that. But my energy levels were just through the roof, and
Yeah.
I just felt great, and I looked great too. So if anyone wants a case study on just the effectiveness of just sticking with body weight training, well, there you go on that one.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I would imagine what the family was making you as well. It wasn't like the perfect protein requirements and all of this sort of stuff. It
Not
was
even
literally,
close.
yeah, like if you just get certain things solid, that's literally all you need. And I do think people, yeah, like massively overcomplicate things. And for me as well, another thing is in terms of like this wasn't really something I've consciously done, but it's sort of worked out well in terms of like the in terms of longevity of being able to train as well. Like lifting massive weights is not, you're not going to be able to do that forever, and it's not good for your body to be like you said about like Eddie Hall, like not to throw the guy under the bus, but he doesn't look the most healthy. You know what I mean? Like he's massive, and his body must be under such strain to be able to like exist in that state. So for me, just being able to, like you said, the energy levels and stuff, like no stress on the joints or very, very little stress. Like I know people who are, which I think might come down to diet as well, who are like way younger than me and stuff, who have already got like knee problems, and they're like, oh yeah, my knees and stuff. I'm like, I've got none of that stuff, and it's like, I think, like I said, it wasn't something I consciously did, but it's just worked out that that type of training that I like to do also is very good for longevity as well. So it's like just keeping yourself like close to your natural weight, but just being very healthy and stuff. That's what was always interested me, I think. So
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that any avenue in fitness that you pursue is going to be valid, but I do hear like similar stories from like professional bodybuilders who would put on like so much mass, and again, like we talked about, this is no disrespect to bodybuilders in any sense of the way, but it's just like I would see some bodybuilders as they get later on in their life into their older years, they would transition to doing more things like yoga and things like that, just because they
I
get
get really
themselves,
yeah,
yeah, they get themselves so big that they can hardly move
exactly.
anymore. And then of course, father time unfortunately catches up with all of us. Like, our days are numbered. That's one of the toughest things about living as a human being is that, yeah, our time is finite. And so, but to live a fruitful life, for as long as we possibly can, I'm
Yeah,
on that similar path too. Again, I'm not going to probably be able to step up on stage and please a panel of judges or anything like that. But it's just I just want to show up like really effectively with just like how I connect with people, having the energy to play with my nieces and nephews, and just
yeah,
and also just like being physically fit, it just looks after your mind too. And if I have better energy levels and a better mindset, I'm kinder to people. I just show up better like in society as a whole. Does that make sense? I mean, it just I
yeah,
don't know.
absolutely.
It sounds better in my head. I don't know if I'm articulating it well enough.
No, it makes sense. It's like what you're basically saying is it's like it's not just how you look or how you feel. It's like a holistic thing that it's like one of
Right.
those foundational things that many different benefits sprout from. Like I always notice a lot of things like that in training. There's these kinds of things that you can do that just appear to be quite a simple practice, but they have a lot of sort of hidden benefits that kind of come from them. And that sounds a little bit like that with how you're describing that then, I think.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
All right. So now what I want to ask you about next is kind of your transition into putting your messages and what you've learned out there, like in the internet space and starting up your YouTube channel. Just getting into this, how did you kind of sort of feel at the beginning? I feel like when people want to get their messages out there, and this was myself included when I started this podcast, but imposter syndrome just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was reluctant to try to put myself out there in the public space like that. So did you face something similar, or did you kind of get it out there without really any worries like that?
Yeah, I think well, one thing for me is like when I started to make content, I actually started to make them on the Pioneer channel, which is another very big YouTube channel, close to 1 million subscribers now. So I kind of got a bit of a trial by fire in that, in a sense, because it was like I had no audience of my own, and then I would suddenly be put in front of a very big audience. So um, I think for me, like what helped me with that was just to, when I would get imposter syndrome, I would notice it was when I was trying to be something I wasn't. You know, like if I was trying to say something that, oh, I'd, like people need to hear it said in this way because that's how maybe someone else said it or something like that. And, or even trying to sort of like talk about the martial arts in a way that will be more appealing to people and stuff. And I'm like, well, that's what it never was for you. So why do you think there won't be others that are interested in, you know, a similar thing that you're into? So I think like the way I talk about the martial arts stuff in my content and the training stuff, it's not like, yeah, do this so you can knock somebody out. It's not all with the aim of fighting. And that's because very naturally that's what it wasn't for me, you know, in training. It was like a self-expression and just an art form that I was like very passionate to do. I almost see it like art in a way. So when I started to talk about it more in those terms, you know, and just like talking about the things that excited me personally, that diminishes the imposter syndrome quite a bit, I think, because then who can really compete with you? Like you feel an imposter when you're trying to be someone else, if that makes sense. So that sort of helped me with that. But I think like every time you probably push the boundaries a little bit and maybe like introduce something new into your content, you're going to feel that a little bit, but just sort of like remaining aware of like people are out there who want to hear your message, and they, when you've built up somewhat of an audience and you've got some fans and stuff, people want to hear basically whatever you've got to say, and they're not going to be like, oh no, I don't like this. So you know, if I went on a video and started talking about something completely irrelevant, people, because they are more interested in you as a person, will be receptive to that message rather than like, which I think it's why it's important to be more personable in your own channel. So you're not just like a presenter of information in a sense, because then it's like you can easily put the audience off them. But when you make yourself more like the brand in a sense, then people are interested in your interests as well. So I hope that kind of answers that. Or
Yeah,
yeah,
well, what I kind of took away from what you just said is that, you know, there's nothing that either one of us can say that hasn't been said countless times over already by someone else. But you and I, we each have our own unique stories and our own unique backgrounds to bring to the table, and so I think that's where we lead from when we try to discuss these things. And you know, it's like, I mean, I like my background, military veteran, small town kid, Peace Corps volunteer, archaeologist by day. Which and then of course at the end of the day, I'm Josh Guerrero. There's no, well, there's other people named Josh Guerrero, but there's no other Josh Guerrero
yeah,
me.
yeah,
There's no other me. I mean, so no one else can tell my story better than I can, and it's the same in
yeah,
in your case as well too. There's so many martial artists that came before you. There's so many great philosophers that have came before you, but you're still Grant Stevens, and you know you're you, and you have
yeah.
your own unique set of experiences that you're bringing to the table as well. So I think I agree with you. That can help get over a lot of imposter syndrome if you just bring yourself forward
Yeah.
for the content forward. I suppose I'd say.
Yeah, and it's like what came to my mind then was that everybody that we like admire in society, you know, these like entertainers or people like that, they're always people that are themselves, you know, like they're always people that really don't care, you know, like even somebody like Bruce Lee or something, he was like so unique and like challenged the status quo and stuff. And it's like, it's easy to view those people like, yeah, but he's like Bruce Lee and stuff. But when he was saying that stuff, he wasn't Bruce Lee that we know. He was just somebody like me and you, and then like became known after. So I think it's easy to see somebody on a pedestal and think like, oh, they can say it because they're this person, but they're just like other people, you know what I mean? And like you'll never get to like a higher level without being yourself. Like nobody ever really makes waves or innovates who just copies somebody, you know, like who or is just like doing the status quo. It's always somebody that like does things a little bit differently. So it's almost like for me, like getting into the headspace of seeing yourself like one of those people that you admire and being like, actually, I'm like that person now, you know, like before they were well known kind of thing, but they would still have to do the same things to get where they are. So if they overcame it and if they can be in that position, then why can't I as well?
Yeah, and I also just think people nowadays they resonate with authenticity, like you know, just a lot
Yeah.
more. Like if you are not being yourself, especially you know those who like know you or have grown up with you, and they see you put out like a YouTube video, if you're not yourself, they'll sense it right away. And then they
Yeah.
may even call you on and saying like, well, why you, just why you faking it, man? Like, why you, putting yourself out there in that way? Because I think in this day and age, especially like in social media, as so many people are like putting content out there, like a lot of people can spot the fakes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's just if someone is actually willing to just put their story like out there, or maybe even just share like maybe like the misadventures that they've experienced, like, along the
Yeah.
way. Cause I mean, it's always, if you go to like anyone's Instagram channel, well, I wouldn't say, I don't know if I'd say most people, but a lot of people, if you scroll their channels, it's the highlight reel and that's
Yeah.
it. They show nothing else. But then when someone will say that, I really struggled with this today. And I guess, I don't know if vulnerable is the right word, but if anything, they're just being honest. They're being
Yeah.
truthful. And I think a lot of people are resonating with that because it's just like they're not trying to fake the funk. They're being real and authentic with their messaging and how they're showing up.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, because that's something for me as well, where with somebody I admire, for instance, like when I learn things that they've struggled with, I like them way more. Like I'm like, yeah, feel like I like this person now. But weirdly with myself, something I really struggled with was like being very guarded and like having to put out this like perfect image of like somebody that had no flaws or like super disciplined and all that sort of stuff. And I'm like, why do you admire that in somebody else, but you don't want to be that yourself, in a sense, So that was something I tried to introduce more in some of my videos. And I made this one like a while ago where I had this quite profound sort of realization of like how much perfectionism had like controlled me, in a sense, and made probably like limited a lot of things. Like you think perfectionism's like this great thing, like your ego will convince you that like, yeah, it's like great to be a perfectionist, you want to do everything well, but it just controls you and it like limits what you'll do. Like you might get something too close to finished and then you're like, no, it's not good enough, and you trash it and stuff like that. And there's loads of cases of people in history that have done that, like with works and stuff. And when I made a video like talking about it, how I was like struggling with perfectionism, I guess, and the way I did it was I just didn't put any editing in it or anything to try to really kind of like tackle it in the video, in a sense, because that was another way that I wanted the videos to be really produced and stuff. And it was just causing me a lot of stress. It was like I was doing so much work on the videos. I was like, this is just annoying me now. I'm sick of this video. I want it out and stuff, but it hadn't been finished and I had to complete it to that standard. And yeah, I think like just when I did open myself up like that, it received a really nice response, and it was, I've tried to do that more and more, but I think because it's a pattern for me not to do that, I'll find myself going back to the old self again. I'm like, no, like just like relax a bit more and you don't have to do it in this way. Like you can be more open and stuff. So it's like a work in progress, but I think absolutely it's something that we admire in others. So like, why not do it ourselves in a way? But it's always difficult because we do feel the word used was vulnerable in that situation. So
Yeah, it is always nice, yeah, when people resonate with the content that we put out there in the world. But as you and I kind of sort of talked about before we hit record here, is that we're not always going to please everyone. It doesn't matter what we say or how good we think we are. There's always going to be someone out there who's just simply not going to like us or like what we have to say.
yeah.
And, with now your YouTube channel being in like, the tens of thousands subscriber numbers, it's just, what's that been like for you? Because I'm sure you've had some hate flung your way along the way.
Yeah, I've had a little bit, not like too much, I wouldn't say. But I think sometimes with it being like a martial arts channel and stuff, people like fancy themselves as like either a coach or a fighter or something, and they like will be like, yeah, I would like I had one comment that was like, oh, I'd knock you out so fast that like you wouldn't be able to say out any of the stuff in this video and stuff like that. Like you just laugh at it and stuff. But I don't mind if it's like if people are actually challenging points like in a kind of like measured way and they're not just stupidly kind of trying to insult you, then I don't mind that at all, because it's kind of like constructive criticism in a sense, or they're trying to understand what you're saying and they're asking questions. But yeah, I think like with the really negative stuff, it's like, I won't lie, it will affect you. Like and some people don't read their comments. I know Joe Rogan has said that like he just doesn't read them because, and some people say that if you don't read them, then they don't exist. You know what I mean? Like if you don't know they're there, then there's nothing that can affect you. But I don't have that problem yet because I'm not like a huge channel, so it's not like I've got millions of comments and there's inevitably going to be some hate in there and stuff. But I think if there is something really negative, I'll just hide it, and then it's like gone. You know what I mean? Or like you can hide the user from the channel if they're like a repeat abuser, so they can't like keep coming back and just leaving stupid stuff on there. So, but it is something that I think takes some time to come to terms with, in a sense. Like I've got a lot better at it now. It used to probably bother me a lot more before.
Yeah, and I'm sure like probably a lot of those comments, and I see this in like some other pages or just like other people I know when they say if they get like hate, they're curious to look at the person's profile picture.
Yeah.
This like the whatever comments you guys saying, oh, I'll knock you out in a second. I mean, I would almost go on a limb to say that that person probably didn't have a picture of themselves up in their profile for them to actually see like, well, what does this person look like? Does this person look like they're physically capable of actually achieving such a thing? Or if they're just like, just talking smack, really. And to some degree, I do kind of, I guess I'll say maybe have pity for people who would do stuff like that because it kind of
Yeah.
makes me think what's going on in their lives where they feel like they want to go out and attack someone because everyone who I know who's getting after it in some way, they're dialing in their health, they're dialing in their relationships, they're dialing in their businesses or their work or whatever the case may be. There's a common denominator for something that they're not doing, and they're not doing that. They are not
Yeah.
going on people's Instagram pages or YouTube videos and leaving, negative comments like
Yeah.
that. It's just they don't have like the bandwidth to do stuff like that because they're so busy getting after it in other avenues and winning, frankly.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure that, and I could be wrong, but I would imagine that like those who would leave comments like that are probably in a state in their life that they're just not happy with. And rather than, trying to catch up to where you're at, they're going to try to bring you down to their level.
Yeah. It's impossible to be like in a happy and fulfilled state and do that. It's like the two things don't correlate together, like
Right. Yeah.
point you made about somebody that's actually pursuing something. I think Rogan said like you wouldn't get Michael Jordan on YouTube like hating on somebody, you know what I mean? And that just says it
Right.
all. It's like it's always going to come from people that are just and you said about like if you viewed their profile or something, they always have no picture, no subscribers, no videos. It's just somebody that's like created an account probably with no intention to upload anything, and they just want to hate on you basically. So it's like, like what's the or sometimes I have even seen them before where somebody will comment something like critiquing something you're talking about or your technique, and they actually have some videos of themselves, and they're like so bad that they're clearly delusional. You're like, oh, you can't be seriously criticizing me when that's your that's your own movement and skills and stuff. So you never know who it is. And I think it's like, it just isn't worth worrying about, really. It's just a waste of energy, like to tie yourself up in that. But yeah, it's one of those things where, like I said, you don't do that from a place of fulfillment. And I think for me, no matter how bad I've ever felt about something, it never even occurred to me to go on a channel and comment. So you've got to, like you said, like how I would say, like victimized do those people feel? It's like victimhood, like they feel that it's almost like your presence has like sort of shaken something within them, like a dark aspect within them that's like triggered them to write something. And it's kind of like because they feel victimized, like you can't feel in control of your life and then feel like you want to do that, because why would someone else's expression bother you that much that you feel like it's, I don't know, harmed your day in a sense? So
Yeah, well, you also have to ask yourself, like, what value does that add to anyone's life to go out and spew hate like that? And admittedly, I've kind of had to catch myself a few times and bite my tongue, especially like here stateside over the course of the last couple years. Like it's been a pretty divisive last couple years, and we don't need to dive too deep down that rabbit hole or anything. But if someone did post something that I didn't like, agree with. And I just kind of said to myself, it's just, what am I actually really going to do if I comment and share my disagreement with what this person said? Is it going to, fix the problem, like on the grand scheme of things? Or is it just going to make like, me more upset, probably make them like, upset when they're already upset? And also, I even think long term, am I going to be on my deathbed one day just like proud of myself that I tried to stick it to this person on social media one time? I mean, is it?
You didn't. You're like, oh,
Yeah,
I wish I had a
yeah,
comeback.
it doesn't make any sense. So ultimately, I'm just like, you know what, just move on. I got stuff to do.
Yeah, I feel like it comes down to the fact of like, are you going to be a creator or a consumer? You know, like
Mm,
a creator wouldn't waste that time. And it's like, even, and consumer goes both ways as well, because like, even the people that are sort of maybe arguing for what you agree with, like that's still consumerism in a sense, because you've consumed some comment and then you're talking about, you know, like even if it's the opinion that you agree with against someone else, and then you see like as soon as one person says one thing on a thread, it's like people just come back and have this huge argument, and it's like, what's the point? Like, why have you ever argued with somebody and ever changed their point of view? Never. So what makes you think you're going to do it on the internet when you're not even in the proximity of the person? It's just like, it's lunacy. And I think like the thing is though, it's not, they're not really trying to change their opinion. They're just trying to, I don't know, like feel something within themselves. I think some sense of empowerment. That's really what it is. It's not, it looks on the surface like they're trying to change their opinion, but really they just want to have a say and feel like they've, you know, got some impact, I think. But
yeah, or a sense of belonging or something like
yeah.
that.
And I always say like if somebody disagrees with something I've done in a video and they've put a huge like a lot of energy into writing a comment, you know, a disparaging comment or something, I just think like why not make your own video, man? Like put that energy into creating your own content if you don't like it. Like I think people sometimes have this weird sense of entitlement when they see a creator making something that like that creator has to please their own opinions and like oh, you shouldn't have made this and stuff, and it's like no, that's like freedom of expression. Like I'm saying this, like you don't get to tell me what to make. Like if you don't like it you can make your own stuff, you know. And that again, that comes down to the consumerism or creation, doesn't it? Like my thing would always be, if I don't like this, I'm going to create something that speaks about it in a more intelligent way.
Yeah, you're just trying to counter like other ideas with what you think might be better ideas, and I encourage that, and to many degrees, because it's like that's how we move forward. That's how we advance as like a society, as a civilization. Is that more ideas are brought to the table, and we try to collectively agree as to like which ones would be like best suited, moving
Yeah,
forward.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
absolutely. So. All right. So, what I want to ask you next, and this is going to be a loaded question, so I apologize in advance, but it's just looking on your journey so far as a martial artist, as a YouTuber, or maybe I'll even just say simply as a human being, just as well too. What have been some of your key takeaways and life lessons that you've kind of learned that you've been able to implement in your life? I mean, we have talked about a few of them so far, but are there any, I guess I'll say, standouts compared to like any others that you can think of?
Oh man, let me think about that. I would say a big one is that you can't escape your, I would say like destiny in a sense, or like your desire or what you're supposed to do. And you've got like two choices. You can either go towards it and work towards it, or you can try to pretend it's not there, but then you're going to go into like a shadow life then, I think. And that's where, because I think like the majority of people exist in a state where they haven't pursued what they actually wanted to do. And they've kind of like settled for something, you know, for whatever reason that is, whether it's their own internal fears or, you know, life circumstances and stuff. And then they end up having to kind of like cope with that life that they don't like by drinking or eating or just trying to distract themselves, because that voice will never go away. It's like, I guess, quite like a spiritual perspective, but I think that we all have something that we're supposed to do. And it's almost like your assignment in a sense. And if you don't do it, then you'll never be satisfied and you'll always feel anxious and stuff. And even for myself, like now, even, and I think it goes in like different degrees as well, in terms of like, you can do some action on it, but if you're not doing what you know you're actually capable of, like your higher self knows you're capable of, then you'll still feel discomfort. So you have to sort of like fulfill it in multiple areas in a sense. So yeah, I would say like you can't avoid yourself in that regard. Or like, and even if you think you can by, you know, like I say, settling for something that you don't really want, it's almost like you're taking a beach ball and you're having to push it under, because the natural state of the ball is to float on top. So you're having to like keep it away all the time. And it's like, so you can't avoid it because you're having to put all this energy into sort of keeping it down. So I would say that would be definitely one of them. Like you can't avoid it and you have to do what you're like called to do, I guess.
All right.
Um, just thinking if there's anything else. There's probably lots of other things that kind of stem from that, but that's like a major one because I think if you try to do that, it can cause a lot of dysfunction in other areas of your life if you like don't listen to what you're doing, and I think that's probably responsible for a lot of problems that we have in the world, basically.
All right, right on. Well, speaking of taking action, that segues nicely into my next question. And now, throughout this conversation, you and I, we've talked about a lot of different ideas and things along those lines. But of course, stories and ideas, I'd say, can only take our listeners so far. They have to follow it up with action when they're done listening to this episode to go out and do amazing things. So, with that, I want to ask you, what challenge would you issue to our listeners today for them to go out there and start living a more adventurous life?
I would say it would be more like a kind of journaling exercise, actually. I would say be honest with yourself about like what you actually want to do and like don't because I think everyone actually knows that like deep inside them what they actually want to do, but we make it like smaller. So it's like you might want to be a singer or something like that, like a world famous singer, but you're like, oh yeah, I'd like to be a singer or I'd like to be a music producer, but it's not really what you want because I think people are scared to say what they really want to do in a sense. So I would say it's not like a physical thing, like a training thing or something, but I would say that's actually easier than facing like your own internal things that you're afraid of. Is like physical training to me would be easier than that. So I think like a real challenge would be to do that and then begin to even just like entertain the idea that it could be possible to do in a sense, because that's in my opinion, the way to actually, it's like your life path in a sense. And if you're not doing that, you've kind of like, I don't know, you've sort of not done what you were supposed to do, I think, in this lifetime. So I'd say just start to get in touch with like what you really want to do and then move towards that.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, I think you said what you want to do, not what someone else, not what you think someone else wants you to do, because I think that's another thing that holds up a lot of people when pursuing certain things. They're wondering if someone in their life or other people in their lives are going to approve with whatever path that they may take on. Where you brought up the point about maybe they want to be like a big singer someday. They'll be like, "Oh, you'll never do that," or anything like that.
Yeah.
Going back to what we talked about with haters and
Yeah.
naysayers and things like that. And then also the other thing, if I may add, would be to, start small too. I mean, if your goal is to become a world famous singer someday, try an open mic night, nearby or something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that, or see if like a local venue will book you, for a night,
Yeah.
or ask a band if you could be an opener for them. So, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
the journey of 1,000 miles always begins with a single step. So,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. And it's like, I think oftentimes with people, like it can even be like family situations as well. That's often much more difficult where like parents will be forcing people to like study certain things and stuff, which is difficult. So, um, I think, yeah, start small is really good because you're not ready for the big thing yet, obviously, because otherwise you would have it. So you need to build your character with those small steps to be able to do that.
absolutely. All
Mhm.
right. So what I have for you next is my final three. These are three fun questions. At least I like to think that they're fun questions that I ask all my guests at the end of the show. So of course you're going to get asked these as well. And the first of these three questions is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
Favorite place? Probably Thailand. I really like
Mm.
Thailand. It was really good. So it was Bangkok I went to when did I go? A few years ago now, but I found it really, really nice place, like really amazing people, so friendly and stuff like that. And I really like the weather as well. So it was good. Very different to the UK.
Did you get in some Muay Thai academies while you were over there?
I didn't actually, no, no, I just went for a vacation, so I didn't really have time to do that. But if I go back, I do actually want to go back and visit some of the other areas of the country, so I'll definitely do that if I go there.
Awesome. All right. My next question in these final three, what is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
Oh man. Well, I think it would be to direct a movie and probably maybe act in it as well, because that's another thing that I've always wanted to do is more like because I've done some film stuff before, like action film stuff with like fight choreography and that sort of stuff. And this is actually part of what I'm doing with the YouTube as well, is I'm sort of building a business out of it so I can then like move more into that sort of stuff, more like the creative projects. So probably make like a good film that I know I'm sort of like capable of doing, I think would be something on the bucket list.
All right, cool. I think that's a first to come up on the podcast. I don't think anyone's talked about doing production to that extent before. So cool, man. Right
Yeah,
on.
it's like it's kind of connected to what I'm doing already in a sense. And that was always, like I said, something I wanted to do. I guess like action acting in a sense, like Jet Li, like Donnie Yen and stuff. So, but I like the production side of it as well. So that would definitely be something I'd like to do.
All right on. And the last three questions, and this is a two-parter. What is your favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild?
My favorite animal is a cheetah because it's like very fit for purpose, which I like. It's like very thin and like obviously incredibly fast. It's the fastest land animal. So there's something about that for me, like how it, just having like a physical body that's just so suited to the purpose has always been something that I've kind of done myself. So I think when I see the cheetah and it's like so lean and it's designed just for that one thing, I think that's awesome. So definitely a cheetah, but I haven't seen them in the wild, unfortunately. I've only seen them at zoos and stuff like that and in nature documentaries. So,
All right, all in due time, though. I'm sure you
yeah,
will.
yeah, I like to see them, yeah.
All right. Well, Grant, that's it, man. That's all the questions that I have for you today. But before we call it a day here, I just want to ask you, where our listeners can go connect with you, where they could find your channel. And I know that you're putting like some coaching services out there too. So, yeah, how can they connect with you and find everything, man?
Yeah, man. So my YouTube and Instagram is at Grant Stevens MA, and MA stands for martial arts. A lot of people ask me that, so I can answer that now. And
So
yeah,
you don't have not a master's degree, not a master's degree.
no, sadly not. um, and yeah, so I do some coaching calls at the minute. So I like help people with their technique or their diet and things like that. Various different things around a lot of the topics I speak about, things like mindset and stuff like that. And I'm putting together some online training courses at the moment. So that'll be kind of like a lot of the stuff I teach in my videos, but put together very succinctly and in much more detail and things to help, take people through the process of really developing that way. So yeah, youtube.com/Grant Stevens MA, and my Instagram is the same as well.
All right, and I'll get everything linked up in the show notes for this episode. Or if we have viewers that are watching the video on YouTube, they can find it in the description below. So it'll be right there to quick and conveniently find everything.
Amazing.
All right. Well, Grant, I want to thank you very much for taking time for joining me today. I mean, I know we had to deal with a little bit of a time difference with you being in the UK and me being based in Texas. So I appreciate you being flexible with that. But also, man, I just really appreciate just how you're showing up in the world. Like I said, you're putting out some really good content on YouTube with both the messaging as well as I said, the production quality is outstanding just as well. So yeah, just thanks so much for being here and sharing your stories and insights with myself and the listeners, man. This has been great.
Awesome, man. Thanks. I really, really appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Right on, man.